Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, what if the way that we cook could change the way that we feel about ourselves, our dogs, and the world around us? In this beautiful and real conversation, I'm joined by Georgie Soskin for a rich exploration of what it really means to nourish. Georgie has over 20 years of professional experience in the kitchen, and she's also a mom and a dog mom who knows the challenges of creating healthy meals when we're time poor or we have been told that we're no good in the kitchen. This isn't a how to cook conversation. This is a conversation about how cooking can lead you home to yourself, wherever you're starting that journey. We talk about food not as something to control or to perfect, but as a living creative force, one that softens our edges, releases old stories, and brings us back into connection with our bodies, our dogs, and the present moment. Georgie shares her own journey into cooking and the transformative power that she's found in taking ownership of the everyday, in feeding her children, caring for her dog Teddy, and learning to meet the messiness of life with curiosity and compassion. Together, we explore how the kitchen can become a place of empowerment, not pressure, a space to challenge perfectionism, to release shame, and to connect to the alchemy of everyday ingredients. From making sourdough to feeding the microbiome, from embracing your own rhythms to quieting the shoulds of holistic health, this episode is a gentle invitation to see cooking as ceremony, nourishment as presence, and the simple act of preparing a meal as a deeply healing thing. You're going to want to stick around until the end because Georgie has an incredible offer for listeners who want to go on a cooking journey with her in the upcoming Conscious Cooking course. Now, before we get into this episode, Stacey Renfrey and I want to let you know that we are so excited that we are going to be taking Learn Fetch on the road to the 2025 Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, happening this November 14th through the 16th at the Birmingham NEC. That's Birmingham, UK, not Birmingham, Alabama, for our US listeners. The Mind, Body, Spirit Festival is the health, well-being, and spirituality festival, and we're beyond thrilled to be there sharing how to live healthily and holistically with our dogs. We are in great company too, with other practitioners and vendors, ranging from oracle readings, crystals, yoga, foodstuffs, you name it. If it's related to health, well-being, and spirituality, it'll be there. There are talks, stands, workshops, and food. I'm very excited about that part. As exhibitors, we're able to offer listeners to the podcast a 25% discount on a one-day standard ticket. So if you'd like to attend, check out the link and the promo code in the show notes. All right, on that note, let's go. Hi, Georgie. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast today. As I mentioned to you, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Sure.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on because today's topic around conscious cooking and all things nourishment for ourselves and our dogs is such an apt topic. I was mentioning to you before we started recording that I've been having conversations with nutrition clients and friends and other people kind of off air,
Mm.
talking about the sort of struggles that we face with our really busy lives and making the things that we quote unquote need to do, turning them into possibilities for conscious connection with ourselves. And cooking is one of those opportunities. Whether you're cooking for yourself or you're cooking for your dog, it can be that opportunity of opening up a portal back to yourself. And I love that that is so embedded in the work that you do. And I think this conversation is going to feel itself very nourishing for listeners.
I hope so. It will, it will be for sure. No, I'm excited to share a little bit about what I do.
Yeah, well, do you mind talking a little bit about how you got into cooking, what your background with that is?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, actually, I got into cooking at this really young age. As in, when I was like 4, I remember one of my first memories is literally making shortbread. Um, but I've always been deeply creative. That's always been my way of expressing myself. So if I haven't been able to be, whenever I've not been able to be creative in life, be it through art or cooking, which is basically the same thing, or anything that feels in tune to me, I've actually got really depressed or sad. And as a child, I used to always sit and draw a lot. So there was always an arty element to me. Because I wasn't deemed very academic at school, was dyslexic. And I think in the 80s, it was just you're dyslexic, so you're quite thick. End of story. And often told that too. So it was, you can do arty things and like, I guess cooking. And I loved art and cooking because anybody could do it. And it was just such a brilliant way to be seen and to show people how I felt about things. And cooking has always been great because you go along with your shortbread to your teachers or your friends at school, and everybody loved you. And you're like, this is the best, like amazing. And they loved you. And they also were enjoying this delicious treat that you'd made. And you felt really proud of it. So cooking for me started very young. I then went into art, trained as an artist, and then I went and did a corporate job, which really, really wasn't for me. And I thought, I'm going to train to be a chef. Much to my mother's horror, she was like, "How are you going to make any money as a chef?" Which is a good question. But I went to Leith's, which is a big cooking school in London, well, it was owned by Prue Leith, who's on the Great British Menu and all that kind of thing, and did the course, a year's course there, and then was asked to actually to teach when I left. So I taught there for about 12, maybe even 13 years as teaching people how to be chefs, basically, which was amazing, and I loved it. And then I had kids, and whilst having kids, it was quite hard to try and dip in and out of it. And I started with my first child. Um, I He would get ill at a lot and was often very overwhelmed by life. Just as a little baby, he was more sensitive than any other babies I was hanging out with. And yes, it could be there was a new mum, but it wasn't. There was something quite just not quite right. And I ended up speaking to a really good friend of mine who's a nutritional therapist, saying, is there anything I can do in terms of food? This was nearly 15 years ago, so a long time ago, before all the likes of all this healthy, huge rise in healthy eating. And she was like, yeah, actually, there's loads. There's tons. That garlic can be antimicrobial and antibacterial and all this stuff. And I was like, no way. So I went really quite heavily into the world of, I would say nutrition, but I say that lightly, just kind of wellness and ways to make him stronger. And it was through food, but also through many other things as well, through body work and looking at him as a whole. But food, I found the most empowering tool. As a mum, you often do spend a lot of time in the kitchen. And when your kids get ill and you're feeling run down, it's the one thing that you really can take ownership yourself to make a change with your life imminently. Like you just literally grab X, Y, and Z and know that it's making a difference. So I'd say that's when it really started to take a different shape from just teaching people how to cook. It suddenly turned into teaching people how to cook in a way that could really empower and heal them. I've always found that really fascinating.
I love that. And I love how you've talked about that switch to from like food and feeding to nourishment and
Yeah.
that other layer of I think that we can kind of quickly Stacey Renfrey and I who do our Fetch First Friday episodes on here, the one that we have recently put out is on the sort of toxic side of the holistic world and the pressures to get everything right and really kind of using some of the holistic tendencies or even conflating holistic and natural that the
Mm.
two but we come from the perspective that holistic is that whole approach looking at it exactly like you're saying multimodal modalities and other perspectives but there can be this tendency to still use this sort of natural and holistic way to kind of fix things and get rid of things and it becomes laced with a kind of fear and a desire for control. But
Mm.
when we switch to this perspective of nourishment, that becomes, for me, anyways, and I'd love for you to reflect on this, a sort of softening.
I was going to say that exact word. It's a
Yeah.
softener. Exactly. It just everything just drops away. That the all the other kind of tight and grasping emotions just melt. And so I think that's it. And I think that's language is a very funny thing. And this is a podcast. It's got so much power behind it. And often there are things that you can't even put into language, but then there are some words that are very good. And yes, nourishing can make in certain instances can be quite like but in that particular one, does exactly that. There's a sense of being able to let go and to realize there's something bigger than you. Nourishment when I was pregnant was a big thing. It's very difficult as a woman. You're pregnant, this is a really big deal. You know that you need to look after yourself and the baby. But and then you got the whole other side. You're gaining weight. Your body's changing. There's a whole way that society saw you, and now it's changing. That in itself is really tough as for anybody who's going through a pregnancy. Um, and there's a lot of, going back to what you're saying, a lot of stigma behind how you should look or how you should be. And similar to the holistic, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And the should have, would have, could have's is really hard and I think quite damaging if you have a mind that is quite easily latched onto things like that, maybe quite addictive or addicted to perfecting and tweaking yourself, which, to be honest, is most of us. Um, so, yeah, it's trying to soften the grasp around those areas, which I think will always be a lifelong journey for me, and for all of us. But there have definitely been times where I have woken up and done the meditation, and I've had the lemon and water first thing in the morning, and I've done the, I don't know, whatever, the list of, I've had the green juice, and then I've had the porridge that was steamed or soaked overnight. And then I've written my journal, and I've realized in doing those things, as much as they sound great and will look really great on an Instagram reel, um, they're just me ticking off a list that isn't actually nourishing me unless I'm really engaging in them really properly, like mind, body, I'm in this. I'm actually going to journal, and actually I might cry from what I've written rather than just going to journal how I'm feeling and then better get on with doing X, Y, and Z. It's I might have my juice and I'll sit down and I'll won't focus on anything else rather than scrolling through Instagram. So it is quite contradictory, and there definitely does seem to be a world out there of a lot of people looking unbelievably great, which is good. I don't have a problem with that either. I mean, there's a lot to be said about presenting yourself and feeling proud about yourself and owning it and not having any shame around that. But I hope that to always be the case for the people that are doing that, rather than a desperate need to be seen or to be proving something or to be, I don't know. And none of us are perfect, you know. But yes, there's definitely two sides to it all, for sure.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. Thank you. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago where we touched on some of this as well, of like the kind of the toxicity of social media in terms of presenting a sort of false sense of what it means to be a human nowadays, right? And we're measuring ourselves against that. And I think that is something that I see leaching into exactly what you were just describing of like we should be doing these things, or I'm not meditating hard enough, right? It's not I'm not having out of body experiences, so therefore I'm not doing it well. That sort of a thing.
Mhm.
And I see it kind of creeping into the way that in the pet parents that I'm working with, they start to berate themselves so much for not doing enough for their dogs, right? It's this transference. Not
Mm.
having human kids, I can only imagine that we do the same thing with our human kids, but
Mm-mm.
having a fur baby, I know that I have been guilty of this too,
Mm.
that we are projecting all of this stuff onto our dogs and we try to take control with, I need to give him so many milligrams of this today and this and that sort of level of not believing in ourselves, not trusting in our own innate wisdom, not feeling into what our dogs are asking for, what we're asking for of ourselves. And I think one of the aims that I have with working with different people, and part of why I thought your conversation would be so helpful for people today as well, is that when you start to prepare food for yourself and for others, whether that be your dog or that be your friends and family, it is such a sacred act. It's such a ceremonial experience when you
Mm.
can choose to kind of come into that moment and really connect. And like you were saying, and feel empowered that you are doing something beautiful, that you are an alchemist in that moment, right? That this is sort of what all the meditation and everything is meant to get us to, is these moments. And I
Yeah.
wondered, you jump in, go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. Everything we do in life, we are energy. We're made of energy. And that might sound out there, but I mean, it's just baseline fact. That is, we're just made of energy. And whatever you put your energy to is going to create an outcome. You're going to be creating something. So when you create food, it's exactly that. I genuinely believe that whatever you cook, your energy goes into it. Hence why I don't think factory food and things like that is so great, because it hasn't got any human energy being put into it. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for everything. I don't ever think that I don't believe in good or bad food. I just see food as energy. I often say this, that, you can be stuck on the side of a mountain about to die and you found a packet of Haribo. You don't go, oh, I'm not going to eat the Haribo. You go, I'm going to eat the Haribo. Like it's an energy, and sometimes you need these things. And there's a lot of chat in the world of food now that is something's good or something's bad or it seems to fall into these two brackets. And I don't really like falling into those too much, because there is a time and place for everything. But yeah, I do believe that when you allow yourself the time to put your energy into something, for me, it is food. It is felt. So I often will make people bread, a loaf of bread, because I often make it as a recipe for 2 loaves. So I'll have a spare and I'll give someone else that loaf of bread. And it's something that I teach. I trained with an amazing woman called Dr. Vanessa Kimball, and she teaches this. And so I teach it to all my students, and I say to all of them, go off and make a loaf of bread, make your bread, and maybe give that other one to someone. When you go out for dinner or you see a friend or just someone completely random, but just see the effect that it has. And it's humongous. I mean, you've literally brought people nearly to tears from making either a loaf of bread or some fermentations or whatever it is, because it's a really felt, known, loved thing. It's not just, I'm just going to buy that and shove it in front of someone. It's like, oh my gosh, you've really given me that time and energy. And, I think we all know baseline that giving your energy or attention or your presence to someone is ultimately the biggest gift. Hence why it's called the present. I mean, that's a cheeky little naff analogy, but it's true. And that's, when it goes into the world of health and wellness and meditating and, I mean, doing all sorts of things. Again, they all are brilliant and they all have their place, but it's almost like this competitiveness to try and do all of them, and that's where the guilt and the shame and a lot of that is deep inner work, like really sitting down and finding out where those stories are coming from. And a lot of them will be coming from childhood and things that you've taught yourself, which is deep work. But creating time, and everybody has to eat. And as far as I'm concerned, it's making food and eating food is one of the simplest and quickest ways to connect mind and body. So being able to sit down, be able to create something, even if it's something that took a few minutes, and be able to sit down and consciously eat it, you are giving yourself permission to just be here and have that moment, rather than grab this, grab that, don't really know what's in it, hope it's okay. It's all just a bit of a jumble, off I go. Again, there doesn't seem to be quite so much nourishment in that.
I love that. No, I agree. So, how would you define for yourself conscious cooking?
So, what, as in for my course or just generally conscious cooking?
Both, both.
Okay. Well, so I've created an online cooking course, which is called Conscious Cooking, which actually really is just an amalgamation of everything that I've really learned really in the well, I've been cooking for nearly 20 years, all my life, but professionally, nearly 20 years. But I guess really from having kids, I think I've always been very interested in spirit and in consciousness. I mean, consciousness is quite a difficult one to explain, but in the more holistic side of things. I've always been drawn to probably what people aren't doing rather than things that they are doing, the alternative therapies and things like that. I don't know why I have ever since I've been here. Um, and it got to a point where I'd done trained in cooking. I bought all these cookbooks and used to look into X, Y, and Z and love it. Cooking to me is literally magic because it's you take something, flour and water, and you turn it into bread. I mean, it's literally magic. And I think what I love about it is it reminds me of that magic every day, that we are literally surrounded by magic all the time, but we're all so busy that we often choose not to see it. But it's when you see the sunset and you go, wow, the world is so amazing, that magic, that feeling that you get. You can't even put it into words, but it's just complete awe. We just forget about it. You could literally, if you're in that feeling at that particular moment, you can go outside your front door and see that magic whenever you like. You know, the fact that we're surrounded by bacteria that will ferment and create stuff that's amazing for our bodies, that's just bonkers. It's just amazing. So I've always been interested by this magic. And I didn't really ever know how to tap into it because I felt it. I felt it a lot, but I didn't know how to kind of like properly tap into it in a kind of in a researched scientific way that I felt needed to be what is done in these days. You know what I mean? Everyone loves a bit of science behind everything. So I did my cooking. I learned a bit about nutrition, or quite a lot about nutrition, but I'm not a trained nutritional therapist. And I then trained in Reiki and yoga because I was like, they sound quite spiritual. I always did theology and things like that at school, and I just didn't really, but I wasn't so interested in religion. Not that I'm against religion, but it just wasn't really like. So I trained in yoga and Reiki, and that then led me into kind of meeting more different people who weren't maybe, I was going to say so institutionalized. That's not necessarily the right thing, but were different people to the ones that I was growing up with, you know, in from my school and from where I lived and la la la. And then it led me in a journey about learning all these different things. So I created this course that is showing people how to cook, often things that you don't know how to cook or make, like knife skills. You're never taught how to do knife skills unless you're at a cooking school, or how to do a chicken bone broth. Most people aren't taught how to do those things. And I actually think that once you have the fundamentals, the baseline stuff in the kitchen, that is like the foundations, and you have more confidence. And I think a lot of people really struggle with confidence in the kitchen. They go, oh, I can't do that, well, that's too complicated, or I always have to follow a recipe and it sometimes it doesn't work. And there's so much shame around something that really should feel very intuitive and normal to us. And it's the kind of and it was something that I think was much more taught within families, um, and it isn't now because we're all so busy. So I teach that as one of the main parts of it because I see that as again, having this story around stupidity or not being able to be educated as a child. Cooking and art was a real way of showing people that I wasn't, you know, and actually everybody can cook. And when I taught at Leiths, you know, you teach 16 people in one go, exactly the same ingredients, all measured out for them beforehand. And every single person would follow exactly the same recipe, and everything would come out differently. Every single person's, and also taste slightly different. So isn't that incredible? So um, I'd like to bring in the actual empowerment side of the technical side of cooking, and then the slightly more holistic side of learning about your mind and body. So learning about what nutrition and food does to your body, carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Then learning about things like your nervous system. I think that's a really big thing at the moment. I've always had a dysregulated nervous system, so I found a lot of power behind understanding that. And food massively regulates your nervous system. You know, how often do you see you go to NHS, you have a baby, the first thing they say to you is, would you like a nice cup of tea? Oh yeah, okay. Well, I mean, what? Okay. I mean, a cup of tea and a piece of toast. I mean, every single person will be offered that after they've had a baby. I'm not saying it's the most nutritious thing in the whole world, but it's clearly quite a baseline, like that's going to make you feel a bit better. Um, and so I bring in all these different elements. I have amazing guest speakers who come in to talk about things like breath work, meditation. And I also talk about traditional Chinese medicine, something I trained for about a year last year in the elements and this connection we have of our planet and the seasons. So I feel it's very much a way of empowering people in their lives, in the kitchen, primarily. It's a lot of showing you how to heal through certain ingredients in the kitchen, or how to make X and Y if you've got a sore throat. Practical things that will help. And even if they're placebo effect, they're still going to help. They're not going to harm. And then more, tools to bring it about, rituals in a way that's doable and achievable. Because there's quite a lot of talk about all these things in social media, but I've kind of backed them up with a bit more science, a bit more fact, and really amazing guest speakers who can actually do the work for me, because I'm not experts in certain areas, breath work or meditation, for example, the nervous system. So yeah, I feel like it's really important, and I know that you'll agree that right now we live in a world that seems very in two spaces. You go onto Instagram and it's like shiny McShiny, everyone's looking so happy and woo. And then also you'll scroll through and see some really devastating pictures of what's going on in the world. And it's such a juxtaposition. And when you look at traditional Chinese medicine, that's exactly what it shows, this constant flux between these two poles of kind of light and dark. And that is the world that's all we're ever going to know. But trying to teach a little bit of balance, and I guess this consciousness is what I hope to bring to the world in a genuine way that feels authentic.
I love it. There's so many parallels in what you're doing in the human space to what we're doing in the canine space too. And one of the things that I've found is that it's almost as if one end will be an entry point for somebody, that they'll either come in, maybe there's been a health challenge for themselves and they have become more aware of nutrition and that sort of sparked an interest, or similarly to you, where they will have fond memories of being a child and making something like with their grandmother in the kitchen, and they sort of reconnect to that
Mm,
love that was embedded within that, and that becomes something that they open up now in their lives, and then they choose to do it for their dogs. Or it's the other way around, their dog has a health challenge and that requires them to start looking at food, and then they start to make that link between, oh, maybe this isn't so great for me either, maybe I should start changing the way that I'm thinking about food. But again, I think what's so important about what you're talking about is it is coming from this, I would say, from the spirit of love, that it's not coming from this is wrong, you have to fix this, get rid of this kind of thing. But actually, it's such an invitation, whichever end of the spectrum you're coming in on, whichever entry point is your entry point, that it's such an opportunity to delve into the love that you are,
mm,
and to be a vessel for that. And looking at cooking is one way that we can be the vessel, but then we can do that in every single thing that we're doing in our lives when we become aware, when we
mm,
become present. Like you said, that is the biggest gift, and it's the biggest gift we can give ourselves,
mm,
and we can give our dogs. I mean, that's all anyone ever wants is a bit of our time in our presence, isn't it? Like when you want that level of connection.
totally. And actually, that's one thing I say. It's not just mind and body, it's mind, body, and spirit. And and I think a lot of people kind of go, oh God, spirit, is that ghosts? Is that religion? Is that, I mean, all sorts of things you can bracket it into. And I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about what lifts you up. So there's that expression, were they in good spirits? Why are spirits called spirits? Because they literally raise your spirits. And it's exactly that. It's this, we all have this spirit in us that when it's tapped into is aliveness and love, and it's joy and it's giving. And I guess maybe I don't really know. I've not actually looked up what consciousness is, but I see that as what ultimately, when we tap into that more, it will create more change and happiness in the world. Um, and yeah, so I guess for me, my medium is in a kitchen with food. Um, and with you, it's with dogs and teaching people about the wonderful things that you do with your dogs, or with your dog and the people that you work with. Um, and we all have our own unique individual essence. And I really believe that we can all push each other up rather than push each other down. That, like, the universe is constantly expanding. Well, I think that that's the same with us. We can just constantly be expanding and be expanding together rather than have any judgment or, want to push other people down. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's I think that I think things have changed a lot as well. I think actually maybe since COVID, things have changed. People seem to be much more open to this kind of level of talk and chat I think honestly, if you and I were having this conversation 10 years ago, I think it would be, I don't know, I think it would be a very different time.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, I think, and we spoke about it when we last chatted, it is to a certain extent also is connecting with the animals and allowing yourself time to be with them. One thing I shared with you is when I first got my dog is called Teddy, and he is about to be 8. I found it actually really challenging. Like I have 3 kids and I got him, and I think my youngest was about 2 or something. So I probably had about a 5 or 6 year old, 4 year old, and a 2 year old. And I thought, this is the done thing. I'm going to get a dog. That's what families do. We'll get a dog. And I love dogs. I grew up with a dog very similar to Teddy and was like, this is going to be great, exciting new challenge. And it was absolutely exhausting. And I really, really, really did not enjoy it at all. I really didn't. And there were times where I was, I just don't want to go for a walk. I've got X, Y, and Z to do today, and you're so low on my priorities list. I just don't want to. And that really impacted my relationship to a certain extent with Teddy. And we have a bit of a love-hate relationship still because he's got a very, very, very challenging bark that goes right through my nervous system. But he is a very good barometer or gauge for me to see how stressed I am. Because on stress days, he is generally in my bad books. And on days where I'm feeling balanced and quite chilled, we have a bit of a love in and it's all quite nice. Um, but again, I know that he gets it, and I know that I'm just trying my best. I think all of us actually are just trying our best every day.
We are, and thank you for bringing that up and being vulnerable with that because I think it's something that a lot of us experience with our dogs, and we feel very guilty about saying that. I've had that experience with Lucky, and even like last night, I had a little issue with him where he snapped at me, and I just was like, out, like get out of the room. I can't handle this. And it may sound ridiculous, but like what helped me with it was like this morning, I actually had a conversation with him about it and said, I'm sorry that that was how I reacted, but this was what was going on. And when you do this, it makes me feel like this. And
Mm.
I think part of that was telling him, but it was also telling myself and giving myself permission that it's okay that, especially I feel the pressure as having the Mystic Dog Mama podcast and being a canine nutritionist and being very out there, very public with having a positive relationship with your dog. But I have to be honest that like part of that is also that sometimes we do not get along and sometimes I want to strangle him and sometimes like you, I don't want to go for the walk. But
But
I
this also goes into cooking. Everyone instantly thinks that I only make the most delicious, nutritious food in the world. I don't. I'm a human being. Like I love chocolate. I love chocolate. So when did it turn into this thing where we've all got to be perfect? Because that's stopping us. There is no such thing. And I think it's the vulnerability and the honesty that's the best part of it. Like you saying that is like, oh, great, because that's normal and that's nice. I suppose maybe there's that. I mean, Gabor Mate wrote the book, The Myth of Normal. It's just, I don't know. There's everything around us is permanently a mirror to us. So last night, maybe Lucky was mirroring something out to you that you didn't want to see, and you reacted. And Teddy definitely mirrors, going for a walk. All it mirrors to me is I have a lack of time and I don't want to prioritize my own self. And I suppose actually these triggers come as a real blessing to show us when we're not being present, but it's just being able to tap into that enough or be able to have enough awareness of that to go, like you did, to apologize and to be honest and real rather than, well, it's his fault anyway, and he should have known better because he's a dog, whatever, you know. Um, but yeah, God, I'm the last person I pick up my kids with unbelievably unhealthy snacks sometimes from school, and you know what? Fine. Like, I think that's okay.
it is okay. It is okay. And again, I see the same thing in the dog world with like total guilt over the treats they're giving or
Mm.
I can't make things perfectly or whatever it happens to be. And it's like, that is okay. That is
Mm.
okay. And like you were saying before, I'm a big believer in the power of the energy that we're putting into food when we're making it as well, or you're just serving it or whatever, that to me is just as important. If you're coming from a place of love with whatever it is that you're giving, that
Yeah.
has a huge impact on how the body actually receives that and on how your dog feels about it. And to me, that's so much more important.
100%. You can literally be having, and I know because I've spent a lot of my life doing this, you can be having every supplement you can possibly imagine that costs eye-watering amounts and be eating every salad that you think is amazing with all the guidance from X, Y, and Z. But if you're not able to if you're in such a state of stress whilst eating it, this I mean, this is the kind of nuances and stuff that's difficult to prove in terms of science, but on a on a cognitive level, that makes sense, And this is again why mind body is so important that's why I teach nervous system regulation and digestive health, because if you're running around literally in a hypervigilant state, you need to find tools to be able to bring you back into that sense of balance. And we live in a society where actually living in a hypervigilant state of permanently onness, like cortisol, whoa, is normal. And I have spent years trying to bring myself down from that state because for me, it's like where I should be because I have my list and I need to do this. And then I need to get my green juice in me and do my meditations. And that it's kind of retraining yourself that actually you don't have to be living like that. And it's actually just, again, waking people up to an awareness of what their body is doing. Some people are completely unaware. And again, I'm sure I can be at many times of the day, of the year, or whatever. But it's just trying to bring in that sense of awareness, which I don't think has been prevalent very much in many people's lives. Of,
No.
you're taught as a child, don't cry and don't do this and be good. And again, I'm not berating any parent because it's hard work. Same with having your dog baby. Like it's the same thing. You teach them all the tricks and this and sit still and shush and don't whine and no barking. And it's exactly the same. Um, but it's kind of, yeah, I suppose having an element of softness and kindness and compassion helps. But again, we're all human. And again, if you look at traditional Chinese medicine and that flux, we're actually supposed to always be in that state of flux. Finding balance is where we'd like to bring ourselves back to, sure. But I don't think it's possible to live in balance because actually you get really bored in it. Be really boring. It's a bit like when my kids say, I wish it was my birthday every day. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't, because yes, it'd be great for about a week, but then after a while, the novelty will wear off. And so we are supposed to live in that constant state of flux. And we are supposed to have a full spectrum of emotions, shame, guilt, anger, all in there. The ones that often the shadow sides that most of us really fear seeing because of, I guess, a lot of narrative from when we were younger or all society. Um, so yeah, there is no right or wrong. I've slightly lost my train of thought, but I went
No,
off.
that's perfect. That's perfect. No, and I agree with you. And I love too that you also have a background in traditional Chinese medicine because something I have found that philosophy of life and feeding and health so reinvigorating and so empowering, both for myself and working with clients, where exactly like you said, we're not meant to, it's not about fixing something and being done. Right? It's actually it's recognizing things are meant to change. It's honoring the seasons and how do you eat seasonally. It's honoring the circadian clock that our bodies operate by. Like we can't stay stuck with one system operating all day long, right? It's everything is flowing. And so when you can ease into that and trust, it's kind of that thing as well that like this too shall pass.
Yeah.
It to me it's linked in with that as well of like recognizing that flow. And what is a problem for us is when we resist that, when
Yeah.
we're trying to like stranglehold it. But when we can come into that flow and realize, like you said, everything is a mirror, everything is teaching us something. So can we put on, as we say in Fetch, the lens of curiosity? And
Mm.
look at what is this asking of me? What is this teaching me? What is this inviting me into? That then there's a whole different energy around it.
Totally. And actually, I just had a client. I just did a sourdough workshop the other day, and I love teaching sourdough because it's the way that I do this class is actually very simple and very quick, but it's a complete reflection of life because I give everybody a very clear list. It's like a little printout of exactly step by step of what you should do. Just like in a way we know of life. We know in the morning we should wake up and brush our teeth and we should have a really healthy breakfast. And then ideally you go and do X, Y, and Z and you have your lunch and you know what you should be doing every day in theory. Yeah, like I guess I mean loosely, but you kind of know what's good for you, don't you, inherently? But it's funny how life gets in the way. And it's when I was teaching this bread, it's exactly the same. I teach them all of these principles, and everyone goes off going, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be able to do it. Great." And I say, "Okay, well, you just go off and give it a go." And within a couple of days, weeks, whatever, I get people coming in with all sorts of questions. Well, this didn't work, or this did, and da da da. I'm like, this is great. And it's a complete reflection of how their life's going. Someone will go, I've run out of flour. What do I do? And I go, well, that's life. You either do this or you do that. And they go, okay, okay, okay. And then off they go, and then and it's exactly the same. I haven't managed to have a healthy breakfast today. What do I do? Well, have a nice lunch, or don't, and carry on going. Like we always have a choice. Um, and I think similar to I mean, whatever anybody's modality or things that focus is cooking is a very good reflection of that. And often people don't even want to even go near it. I just don't cook. End of story. I get somebody else to do it for me, or whatever the story is. And again, there's no judgment to that either. Everybody has got their own life stories, etc. But it's interesting, you know, to see what that story is or what the resistance is around it. Similar to with what you teach, why someone might not want to do X or Y with their dog, or it's
100%.
always showing something.
It is, and I often talk about kind of offline the way in which when I work with clients who might be having resistance or I'm having resistance, looking at where might we be arguing for our limitations as well. How does resisting that actually perpetuate something for myself? And where am I thinking that I'm not capable? Or why am I afraid of the change that it might be inviting me into? Whether that's a change in identity or me taking something on, is that going to impact my relationships with people? All of that kind of stuff. And again, like you're saying, it's not a judgment, but it's just looking at, ooh, this is interesting that this resistance, if I choose to look at it that way, is an opportunity
Yeah,
instead of something to keep pushing away.
100%. And it is frightening. And your mind is set up for survival. All it wants is to survive. So it's very good at holding us back and keeping us, not necessarily what can be small, keeping us safe and saying, well, don't do that. That's a resistance. Just don't do that. Why would you do that? That's going to definitely be dangerous. Don't do it. Whereas it often is in moments in life where you do slightly not necessarily push is not necessarily the right way, but maybe walk towards the resistance and you feel it and you sit with it and you allow it. And that could be in all sorts of ways. That could be through crying. It could be through communicating clearly with somebody. It could be through doing the one thing that you really said that you would never do and actually finding out that you really enjoyed it. Whatever it might be. Or it could be something really, really not nice that you don't enjoy. How many times have you heard stories of people telling you the most horrendous things have happened in their lives, but as a consequence, the most wonderful things have come out of it too? So, I guess it is life. We are always going to be always permanently evolving. And I think that's actually one thing I've just thought of is, I suppose one thing that's a little bit I find hard on the social media space to a certain extent is there are a lot of people out there that just say, they're very clear on their message. This is the thing that's going to fix you forever. And whilst it might be the thing that's fixed them with X, Y, or Z, I, and maybe this is my story and a lack of belief in various things myself. Um, I prefer to say that life is a many-pronged approach than you go with that one pill and it will fix you. Because, yeah, sure, I'm sure there are pills out there that do all sorts of things, but I am always a little bit skeptical about people saying that they are the end result of whatever it is that you're looking for. Um, because I think life is a lot of it is about searching, maybe not searching. A lot of it is just an unravel or a constant peeling away of the onion layers. Um, and it never ends until your last breath.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I think any end any end result that's kind of promised really is about what you will arrive at, what you will experience is your next edge,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever that is, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the invitation for that person to then pursue that further or not.
Yeah, it's like how I mean, we're also lucky to have podcasts are so great. You can tap into all people's lives now. And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but you often hear about sportsmen, for example, reaching their peak, don't you? And they get to the pinnacle of the one thing they wanted all their life, and they get there and they have this massive anticlimax moment of going, well, what now? This is like the worst day of my life, you know? And it's exactly what you're saying. This is that, well, that's the, you've got to jump off a cliff at that point to just trust in your next, I mean, yeah, obviously, and I mean that not literally, to trust in the next step or stage in your life. And it's hard because with that has, it's a lot of healing, but it's a lot of, yeah, it's hard and it's scary.
It is, and it's about us embracing it, I think. But for people who may be stepping into the kitchen is their next level, that is their next edge, and they're really worried about that for whatever reason. That might be trauma that they have around being able to care for themselves, or scarcity, or maybe they had bad experiences, or like you, that they were told that they weren't good at something, and so maybe they weren't good at cooking. What is something that they can do to transform the kitchen into a space of safety and curiosity for themselves in order to start exploring those edges?
That's a good question. I think by exploring a little bit further out of their remit, just like dipping their toe into new things is always a good place to start. I do think having the foundation of certain things really helps. As I said, having just understanding how a kitchen works, that could be knife skills, how to make it safe, literally through kind of making sure that your counters are safe, making sure when you cook, you don't overcrowd the area that you're cooking in. You don't want cross-contamination. Cleanliness. Those are very basic steps, but if you're not taught them, a lot of people just don't know them. And I guess you could say that a lot of them are common sense. But again, having taught a lot of people at Leiths, that I've been asked some questions that really were like, wow, okay. Like I remember someone saying, how do I separate the eggs? And they had two eggs and they just took the two eggs and went, is that how I separate them? You're like, well, actually, that's makes complete sense. Like, it's not. I'll show you what it means. You have to open it and you take the yolk and the white out. But why? How were they supposed to know any different? Someone got an orange and said, "How do I juice it?" And they just held the whole orange and squeezed it. And again, that I don't. I think that's completely well, fair enough. That's quite a logical thing to do. So I would start exploring areas that you find a little bit nervous making. Try and feel comfortable in the kitchen, and you know, well, yeah, try and branch out a little bit. There's so much out there to learn about food. Um, it is a bit like the Wild West, to be honest. Um, but just be kind to yourself in the process of it. I mean, I would say come and join me because I think I am quite good at guiding people out of that worry or there is no stupid question and there is no what reason to really fear it. Um, and I know that I can say that for someone who feels quite comfortable in a kitchen, but I still have moments of worry or panic around things. I really do. Um, and I think that's quite normal. I think that, but I also know it's my mind just keeping me safe. So maybe it's just important to realize that maybe whatever is talking to you, it's saying that you're not good at X, Y, and Z. It's just a past story that maybe just needs to be recorrected or updated.
No, I agree. And I think another thing that I hear quite a bit is I don't have the time. It's going to
Mm,
take too long.
yeah,
And uh,
yeah.
and I understand that, especially in the busy world that we live in. But I think something I have found helpful is starting with something that I know is not going to take a lot of time. So it's not thinking like, oh, I'm going to prepare a 7 course dinner as like my first
Yeah.
my first attempt, right? It's like, well, maybe I just make a salad. as a starting point or
Totally. And actually time is a brilliant one. It's a brilliant use of a way of making an excuse, because actually time doesn't really exist. And it is really one of the main things I hear too. I just haven't got the time. I haven't got basically you're just saying I haven't got the time to look after myself, ultimately. And there are so many easy ways to get around that. Having a store cupboard full of a few key things will mean that you always have a delicious meal to be made. Having some pulses in jarred pulses in there, you can instantly make up a quick, we have something called a bean otto. It takes literally 5 minutes. It's delicious. Having a fridge with lots of condiment, well, not lots, but a few condiments and a few key things. I promise you, once you have enough confidence to be able to open the fridge, and when it's pretty empty, you go, I think I can figure it out. Then that's empowering, and then you're like, well, good. I didn't need to make that 7 course. I don't actually teach like that. I am time poor. Like as I said, mum of three, just like any of us are time poor. It's a good excuse to have. I don't want to teach people how to do really long-winded things. I'm all about doing things as quickly and efficiently as possible, but with as much nourishment as possible. So I boost a lot of the recipes because I think that's a way of empowering ourselves. Our soil is not like what it used to be, and our food isn't what it used to be. And you have to be quite clever about getting more nutrition and nourishment out of your food. So I try and put in as much as I can in as short time frame as possible and with as little ingredients as possible so that it can be bish bash bosh, you're done. Tick, you know, because it doesn't need to be difficult, or challenging or stressful. It just needs to be delicious and something that you hopefully will enjoy so that you keep on coming back to it. That's
exactly. I love that. It's a strategy I've taken for myself, and it's a strategy that I try to share with clients as well for their dogs, that once you have the basic understanding of what a dog needs, so going back to like what you were saying about boosting things nutritionally, when you have a general sense of what a dog needs and you
Mm.
have those on hand, it becomes easy. It's when you don't know that it can feel overwhelming. And when you can set aside, we can find this is something, and I wonder if this is something that you share as well. It's figuring out your rhythms with all of this too. Like for example, like with in terms of the dog food prep,
Mm.
Stacy preps for her dog Ted a
Mhm.
month at a time. That's what she's found. She takes a couple of hours one Saturday and she makes all of his food and freezes it for a month, and that way she doesn't have to think about it. That doesn't work for me because I don't have the same freezer space. And I prefer to go and do it weekly. So I'll do like the same, like it takes me maybe half an hour to prep stuff for Lucky and put it in I cook his food, put it in the slow cooker for a couple of hours, and then we're done for the week. It's figuring out what your rhythm is, because if I had to do her rhythm, it would be overwhelming. And if she had to do mine, it would be overwhelming.
And this is the thing, this is why it's all so individual. And I call it my levels. So everybody's got their levels. And again, when I teach people, I can have a class of 8 and I have no idea what any of these people's levels are. So when I say, for example, I'm doing sourdough, there could be people in there that only get white bread and that's all they want, which is fine. Or there are people in there that have got their own mill at home and make their own flour and go foraging for flowers and to put into their flour blends. Okay. Neither of those are wrong. They're just the way that that person is, and that I suppose we could almost call it their window of tolerance, what they can tolerate in their life. And and that's absolutely fine. But it's like you said, it's finding your levels and sticking with it. But if you're time poor, it's finding time poor recipes that can work for you. And I don't have I have a stuff that I teach people, but I kind of stick with that. Like, it's not that often that I reach out and go for totally brand new recipes. I mean, I try and do stuff on Instagram, but generally speaking, we all have a repertoire that we stick with, and that's why we find inspiration from other people. So, and as I said, there are people out there that will go out into a field and slaughter their cow and then get the meat for their steaks. So I think that's it. It's realizing your level, making your little repertoire, making sure that you have a nice space that you enjoy, that you feel confident and happy in, that makes you feel quite calm, and having a store cupboard that's your backbone. And having, I think, freezers, if you have a small freezer, then that's fine. I do think you can rely heavily on a freezer if you have a bigger freezer. or having good condiments and things. So you've just got everything around you to support you. It's like anything in life, if you've got a good network of friends around you, or a good network of colleagues around you, or good whatever it is, you've got that support structure around you, then you'll thrive. Whereas if you're just sitting there thinking it's not going to work, this is all terrifying, and I'm not going to ask for any help, well, you're just going to stay in that space. But there are quite easy ways to bypass that very quickly, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I think cooking in community and learning in community is so important.
And then you
It's
can
so
eat
fun.
together and you can feast together and then you connect with other people and you build a community and uh, that I just don't believe that anybody is a good cook or I just don't believe that at all. Look, really, if you want to go really basic, just learn how to fry an egg on toast and get some salad. I mean, an egg is like was it nature's fast food, So start small.
Yeah. I love that. So, if people want to learn with you and from you, you offer in-person courses and you offer your conscious cooking class online, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
how can they learn more about it? What types of offerings are you doing now?
So, well, I have a lot of videos that are free on Instagram that you can go to and just get inspiration from and see whether you like what I'm offering. There's lots there, and I think you can tap into my energy quite easily through that and see what I'm like as a person. And then online, I do an online sourdough course, which is brilliant. I send you the sourdough starter, and you have a load of videos that you can follow along, and you have access to getting in touch with me. I think people really like knowing that I'm there if they need to get in touch. Um, and I am. I have often answering all sorts of questions on bits and bobs. I do in-person sourdough classes. I do love teaching sourdough a lot. I'm not a traditional baker, but I just think it's a lovely way of teaching people. Um, Most people love bread and most people love a good slice of toast. And this bread is boosted. As I said, I trained with this woman, Dr. Vanessa Kimball, who works with Tim Spector, the Zoe project and things. She's an amazing woman. She's a doctor in the digestibility and nutrition of sourdough. So she's pretty mega. And her bread that I teach is so boosted with goodness for your microbiome and your gut that I think it's a real game changer. I think it's one of the best loaves you can get and make yourself. So I know first thing on a Monday morning when I have my slice of toast, my peanut butter and my jam on top, that I'm probably eating about 18, 19 different things that was going to be feeding my microbiome, which we know is, according to science at the moment, is really good for boosting our gut, which, 70, 80% of our immune system is based around. Um, so I love that bread. And I have the Conscious Cooking course, which is a 6-week online course, which is awesome with weekly cook-alongs and weekly guest speakers. And I do some retreats every so often, off to Spain in October. So that's going to be amazing. So there's lots of different ways you can get hold of me for sure. And I can do one-to-one cooking with people, especially people who might be a bit nervous in the kitchen or want help setting up their store cupboard or just sometimes it's just nice to have a bit like a big sister say, get rid of that, keep that, etc., to go through the practical side of things. So yeah, I am a walking Georgie Soskin, walking, talking little bundle of cooking stuff. Covers quite a lot of different areas from cooking to, as I said, kind of slightly more holistic wellness.
I love it so much. And where is the best place for people to touch base with you on all that? Is it your website?
So yeah, my
Or
website is www.georgiesoskin.com. So I've just changed to my name, a little bit easier. And my Instagram is the same. It's at Georgie_Soskin. So
perfect.
starting a YouTube channel, but it's not quite ready yet. But yeah, watch this space.
Very exciting. I will leave all of those links in the show notes so people can connect directly with you from there. Georgie, is there anything I've not asked you today that you want to make sure that we cover? Because you've been just such a wonderful, wonderful guest to interview today.
I think so. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being so kind and
Oh,
welcome.
thank you. Thank you. I do have one last question then that I ask all of my guests before I let you go. And that is, what do you feel Teddy or maybe other dogs in your life have taught you about what it means to be human?
Mm. I think it probably goes back to that point I was making earlier that he's a gauge to my happiness. Um, and if I allow myself the time to really consciously be aware of it, then as in if I allow myself to gauge the mood that I'm in, he's a visual reminder of how to bring about balance. And I would say the majority of the time that's not necessarily a good thing with his barking, but he definitely is unbelievably kind and compassionate no matter what life seems to throw at him. And as much as I joke about my relationship with him, I'm very grateful for it.
Well, I'm sure he's mirroring those same aspects about you as well. And just something to add on to that as a point of reflection for you, because again, Stacy has a cocker who is very loud as well, very vocal. And we often talk about that when he's the most vocal, it's actually when she needs to use her voice the most.
Interesting.
And so there's that reflection point for her, and throwing it out in case that's a helpful thing for you to think about, especially as you're changing and evolving from previously being the Little Plow Kitchen into stepping into your own space and using your name and claiming who you are in this space. It seems like a beautiful opportunity of mirroring.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lovely way of looking at it for sure.
Georgie, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom today. It has been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it too.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my conversation with Georgie Soskin. I hope it has inspired you to see your kitchen and cooking for yourself and for your dog a little bit differently. Now, like I mentioned, Georgie has very kindly put an offer together for any Mystic Dog Mama listeners who would like to join her upcoming Conscious Cooking course, which starts online on the 22nd of September. She has gifted you a 30% discount using the code DOGMAMA30 at checkout. Just go to her website, georgiesoskin.com, to book this and learn more about any of her other offerings. You can also connect with Georgie on Instagram at Georgie_Soskin. I've left all of this information in the show notes. And the other offer that I mentioned is that Stacey Renfrey and I will be taking Learn Fetch on the road to the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival in Birmingham this November 14th through the 16th. And we can offer listeners to the podcast 25% off a one-day standard ticket. How amazing is that? If you're interested, use the link and discount code that is in the show notes. Okay, until next time.